My name's Matthew Wittemeyer. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing at Inform. If you want to know more about Inform, we've got our booth there. The team there would be more than happy to tell you a bit more about what we do. But more to the point, why am I standing up here moderating the next gen thinking and talent paradigm session? So for those of you that are familiar with TOC, you'll know that in 2019, Inform brought to TOC Europe the first Millennials in Maritime session, where we brought 6 millennial-age speakers up onto the stage, which accounted for nearly all of the young people presenting at that year's event. And since then, we've continued that work. So looking at how young people get attracted into the industry and promoting their voices and their thinking is definitely a very central theme to who we are at Inform. And we're very happy to be up here on the stage with a couple of guests who are certainly more qualified than I to talk about paradigms around young individuals. We should certainly see more people in the audience than we do at present, and there's a distinct reason for that. If we look around the TOC conference, there are a significantly higher proportion of older individuals wandering around the aisles, doing deals, and those individuals are set to retire over the next decade. And that accounts for somewhere north of 50% of our industry. And it's going to be a mass exodus of talent, knowledge, and skills. And if we don't start looking to backfill those positions and hand off the knowledge and skills that have been gained over decades in our industry, we're going to be in a very, very dangerous situation in a decade or so. So I'm very happy to be able to moderate today's session. The first speaker is Dr. Benjamin Nitsche from the Berlin University of Technology, and I welcome him now to...
All right, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Benjamin. I'm responsible for the Competence Center of International Logistics Networks at the Berlin University of Technology. So we are funded by the Kühne Foundation, and we are in this Competence Center regularly looking into several trends and strategies around international logistics networks. And how do we do that? We have different industry working groups with different people from the industry, people like you and others, mostly focusing on people from manufacturing industry and logistics service providers, talking on different technology-related, geopolitical, strategical topics related to the development of future international logistics networks. And we have those industry groups in China, in Germany, but also African countries such as Rwanda and Ethiopia. So just to give you a background on that. And today, I've been asked to talk about the training of next-gen leaders in logistics. So basically the question of how will or should the mindset of a future leader in logistics look like? How should we train young people in logistics to become leaders and to become professionals in their field? And I would like to base that on a study that we made on the implications of the COVID pandemic on future international logistics networks. So at the first part, I would like to dive deeper into a study that we made, which has not been directly focused on training of next-gen leaders, but is focusing on the future. So which development paths emerge from the COVID pandemic? How will international logistics networks look like? And then, based on that, tell you what, from our point of view, the implications are for next-gen leaders. So as we started our discussions on the COVID pandemic right at the beginning, the beginning was in March, global pandemic, but in May 2020, we had our first industry workshops on this topic because people approached us with several questions, people from the industry, and asked us, okay, what logistics trends are emerging from this crisis? What are good practices? How do other companies respond to this crisis? How do they become resilient? Maybe also the question emerged, is globalization about to reverse? We have seen so many global disruptions, and a lot of people were asking us in this competence center and in the working groups we had, is globalization about to reverse? Is there a relocalization of activities going on? And what other future developments development path emerge. So there have been lots of questions, and to dive deeper into that, in 2020 and 2021, we did 5 focus group workshops, mostly online, several online surveys, and over 140 companies or participants from the industry participated in that. Lots of manufacturing firms from automotive, chemistry, and consumer goods, but also lots of technology providers and logistics service providers. So just to give you the scope, that this study was not on the development of ports or the container industry specifically, but it definitely has some or has a lot of implications for that as well. But we looked into the whole network of people within international logistics networks. So what have we achieved? First of all, we achieved some logistics lessons learned. Those people assessed several theses. We also made a gap analysis. I will show you a short insight on that. Gap analysis on how do companies currently respond to the crisis? What are crisis management strategies theoretically, which could be good? And how mature are those strategies today? And in the last part, we also looked into the future. We did that last year, so 5 years from there, 2026. And we asked ourselves, okay, how will future logistics networks will look like now in 4 years? So coming to the main lessons learned, we saw, and also our industry panel said, that automation of logistics processes is becoming inevitable. We had that in the last session here. So automation is the core trend. It had been there before the crisis, but it is even stronger now. And not just automation of physical processes, but also a lot of automation of informational processes within a supply chain. Also the corporate role of logistics, especially in manufacturing firms, which maybe formerly have been driven from other fields, the role of logistics has been strengthened throughout the crisis more and more. And one important aspect here as well, people from the industry think that logistics will be allowed to cost more in the future, because they know that to become more resilient, to become more digitalized, and to strengthen the supply chain, they need to invest. They need to invest in automation technologies, in digital twins, in whatever it is. You can name all the buzzwords. Everyone has to find their way through that, but this will need investments. And due to this crisis, they have lots of selling points to explain why those investments are necessary. Also, political and regulatory conditions have been very challenging in that time. But when we talk about digitalization, and we hear that all the last days, that this is the most important trend, we saw, especially at the beginning and throughout the pandemic, that although digitalization is important and received a push through the crisis, the core problems remained the same. So we do not have real-time access to all the data we need in our network, right? So it is really challenging to get that, especially in a crisis, right? So, and just to give you some small insight into the gap analysis that we did, it looks a bit complex, but it's relatively easy to understand. On the left side, you see crisis management strategies that we gathered from companies and asked them, okay, how did you respond to the crisis? They are very traditional things like crisis reports, logistics crisis plans, weekly and daily crisis management teams, so all of you perform things like that. But there's also more advanced things. And I would like to give you 2 examples here at the top where the gap was the biggest. The gap between if a strategy is efficient or would be efficient to manage a crisis. This is the red dot, so the more it is on the right, the more efficient it would be. So it is desirable to have that. I will explain both in a second. But the triangle, the gray triangle, explains, so the more it is on the left side, the lower it is, explains the implementation maturity of this strategy in the whole industry. So we surveyed the whole industry, and then we saw, okay, theoretically, everyone thinks that intelligent, AI-based early alert systems for risk in a network are the next big thing. They need that. That would be efficient to have that. It would be great to have that, and efficient to manage a crisis with that. But there's a huge gap between this theoretical efficiency, but concrete implementation maturity at the company level. So nearly none of the companies had a system running that is working well, using AI to alert risks earlier. They are in the testing phase. They are very much on the left here, which definitely is an issue. And they reported to us the main problem is they have here is talent. They know this trend, but they do not have the talent to tackle this, to implement things like that. Another topic here is the supplier risk tower. This is an automation approach, automation of informational processes. This is an approach that has been implemented by the company Schaeffler. And they reported it to us, and they said, yeah, what we did, we needed at the pandemic in May, in June, in July 2020, we saw, okay, we need transparency in our network. We need to see which suppliers are critical, on which suppliers do we have to focus. They have a supplier base of 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 suppliers, but of course not every one of them was critical in the pandemic. So they need to see on which ones to focus. And what they implemented then was an automated supplier survey. They automatically surveyed their supplier about their current state, their financial status, their production activities, other critical issues at those suppliers. And then out of the responses, they automatically calculated risk scores on a plant level, on a regional level, on a supply chain level. They calculated risk scores for each supplier and then saw, okay, out of those 3,000 to 4,000 suppliers, there are just 50 that are really on high alert, and we have to focus our activities on them to keep them running. And this then all came into something they call a supplier risk tower, which is an automation approach. And they said if we would have implemented that before the pandemic in a non-crisis situation, it would have taken them 6 to 9 months in such a big company to implement that, because they had to find people to support them, they had to get the money to implement that, and they had to convince all the different parties. But due to the urgency and the crisis, they were able to implement that within 6 weeks, and it is still running, so they still use that. So they had to be fast, they had to be agile, but they were, just because of the pressures they had in the pandemic. Last slide about the implication, and then I'm talking about next-gen leaders because it's directly related to that, is the question of how will future logistics networks look like. And we developed different scenarios, and I will give you an excerpt on that. The scenarios on the left are very likely to be true in 4 years from now, and the ones on the right are very likely to become true. And the first one is that the most likely scenario of all of the things that we surveyed is that the majority of logistics network is still positioned globally. Only few industries localize their logistics networks. So globalization is not going to reverse. Just in some industries it makes sense in some for some products, but the whole logistics industry itself will not reverse globalization. Instead localizing, building resilience and flexibility through highly diversified logistics networks is the widespread approach. So we will see more flexibility, and the question is, okay, how do we achieve that? One thing how to achieve that is, due to high investment in digital tools and technologies, real-time visibility of multi-tier logistics network is the norm and widely accepted and deployed. This means today we do not have that. None of the companies we surveyed said, yeah, we already have full visibility over our multi-tier supply network. We do not have that. But we need that, otherwise we cannot fight crisis in the future. So they will invest into digital twin technologies, digital logistics twins, so twins of networks, not on an asset level, as one approach, but also others. So to be there on the right in 4 years from now, of course, they have to invest today. They also invest in robotic process automation and so on. The least likeliest scenario is that the COVID pandemic was a temporary problem, but did not significantly impact the design of networks. So therefore, they are pretty sure that this pandemic was a huge push for future development of logistics networks. So the question is, when we talk about all of this, how will future leaders look like? How maybe their mindset looks like, and how do we develop them? And before I answer that question, I would like to tell you what future leaders in logistics need to do. And when you know what they need to do, you know what what a mindset they should have. First of all, they need to shape globalization. Globalization is not about to reverse, as I said, but they need to create global value chains in a responsible way, not just getting globalization flow, but proactively, responsibly, shaping logistics, and also integrating especially companies in Africa, which is the biggest future market. We heard that in the session yesterday. Also, TOC Africa will be there next year. So to reshape globalization in a responsible way is one of the core topics here. They also have to tackle risk and dynamic. Of course, we saw that in the pandemic, but also and now we see that new types of resilience and flexibilization are needed. But the question is, how do we get there? Automation is not the only approach, it's one of them, but there are several approaches, but they will need to do that. They will do that by utilizing digitalization, so I will not stress this term too much. We talked about this the last days already. But of course, what is important here in digitalization is that digitalization also enables leapfrogging of logistics performance, especially in developing countries. So we could talk about this a lot. I mean, it's not a focus of today's session, but this is something that should also be considered, that digitalization is not just for industrialized countries that we are here in today, but also in developing countries. Digitalization can be a part of leapfrogging in logistics performance, but also in a sustainable way. And what they also have to do, I mentioned sustainability shortly. They have to create sustainability. I think it's in the interest for all of us. So this is what they have to do: shape globalization, tackle risk and dynamics, utilize digitalization, create sustainability. So the question is, how does the mindset of a future leader in logistics look like? First of all, he should have holistic thinking about all the different aspects of his or her decision that they do. Future problems are highly complex. We see that not just in the pandemic, but also in other fields, that problems are so complex that just focusing on one individual company or their logistics is not enough to make a real educated decision about future developments. He or she should have an analytical mindset, so people need to know how to read and process data and come to decisions. It seems pretty easy, but we see that of course with data you can do a lot of things wrong, but you can also do a lot of things right, and you have to know how to read and process data, have the analytics tools available, and of course future leaders in logistics need to know about that. Therefore, they need to be technomically oriented, so not just economically oriented, so just studying business administration and hoping that I will become a leader in logistics maybe isn't the only way. They also need deep know-how about logistics-related technologies and their potentials, digital twins, AI, blockchain, IoT, and all those things that you know and see here on the conference will become necessary, and they need to then be combined with business aspects and see, okay, what is economically feasible, what makes sense, but therefore you need to really deeply understand those technologies, even if you do not really implement them, but you need to understand the effects of them. Future leaders need to have a geopolitical understanding, a global mindset, because we see that a lot of aspects that design the future of international logistics networks are geopolitically related. It's also not the focus of today, but we did a lot of studies about that. It's the question of how does the Belt and Road Initiative shape future of logistics networks. We could talk about how volume flows from northern European seaports shift to southern European seaports and what the role of China is in there. But if you have such things in mind, you have to understand all those political and geopolitical relationships in the world. So only focusing on core logistics in a company and how to organize a warehouse or whatever in your studies will not help you to solve those bigger problems in the future. Those people need to build intercultural competencies. We're living in a very international world. Logistics management depends on people all over the world, and they will be more and more integrated. So intercultural competence is something here. And last but not least, all of them need to be fast and agile. We saw that in the pandemic. Those companies that were fast and agile responded better to the crisis. But to be fast and agile, you need people that are fast, that react fast, that have an holistic thinking, combine that with the analytical mindset, are technomically oriented, and come to decisions. So last aspect here now is, what are the implications then now on the right side, implications for future teaching and training? First of all, as it's been explained on the left, you can see that on the right here, you have to strengthen technology-related topics in logistics education. And you have to be very practice-oriented. Lots of universities, I'm coming from the university background, therefore I'm talking more about universities, are very theoretically based. Theory is fine, but in the end, you see all over the place that all the theories you have on logistics management do not always apply in logistics practice. So therefore, build real-life case studies, build competence on real-life problems already during the studies. Always train those people, always bring in people from the industry, so that whenever they graduate, that they are directly able to help in a company because they have seen several problems from the industry before, rather than knowing some theories like the bullwhip effect, right? Next implication is create a global mind, create a global mindset. So, of course, to do that, you have to foster the understanding of the characteristics of different economic regions in the world. You cannot design international logistics networks when you do not know what the difference of doing logistics in South America is compared to doing logistics in sub-Saharan Africa or in Europe or in China or wherever you are. There are cultural differences, there are differences in material handling, there are technological differences, there are so many differences all over the world. If you do not know that, you are just planning networks by pen and paper on a map, but they will not become reality. They will not materialize because you do not know the characteristics of all those different markets. So you have to strengthen that already in training. And last thing is lifelong learning. Of course, it has been mentioned by Matthew at the beginning, the world is evolving, and it's evolving very, very fast. Topics are emerging more and more often that you haven't thought of yesterday. So therefore, just studying, going to the industry, and never training yourself would not work in the future. Maybe in 10 years, we talk about totally different topics than we do today, or in 20 years, or whatever. So therefore, all the leaders that are becoming leaders today or are already in important positions need to implement training approaches that enable lifelong learning in logistics, several training approaches that might be different to certain university training because they will not come back to university, obviously. So implement this in a company is definitely important to keep track with those developments. Okay, so there's been a lot of input. I hope it was interesting to follow. And whenever there are questions, I'm here. But if I understand that correctly, we will have the next presentations first, and then we will gather all the questions. Okay?
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker will join us remotely via Zoom, so we'll bring him up onto the screen shortly. Please join me in welcoming Gino Schettini from the Association of Exporters of Peru, who will give his presentation on skills that young people need in the future.
Hello. Good morning, everybody. Are you listening to me?
Yes, we can hear you. You can continue.
Hello. Thank you so much. My name is Gino Schettini from Lima. I'm a business development manager with more than 20 years experience on global solutions, and I'm here representing the main Peruvian Exporter Association, the Institute, which is ADEX. It's a real honor and pleasure for me being here in this very important event, TOC Europe 22, and presenting to you my opinions and ideas about this topic, next gen thinking and new talent paradigms on port and terminal industry. So let's see. The first point, what I'm going to tell you is what is the profile of seafarers and port staff of tomorrow. Well, here, what I can tell you first is in less than 50 years, port operations have evolved from labor and time-intensive scenarios with low productivity, as the ones we can see in the picture below, where probably the main use or the most important tool were seafarers' muscles. We have passed from that to a more efficient and high productive operations where machines, technology, and automation are mandatory solutions to continue in the business. So what those high technology machines used nowadays in the port and terminal operations needs? In my opinion, first of all, needs high skilled workers. But not only high skilled workers in port or terminal operations like load or unload cargo, not only that. Now seafarers should have a complete set of what we know as soft and hard skills. Soft skills like emotional and social intelligence, team player, work ethic, or safety rules, and hard skills like project management, problem solving, and time management, for example. But seafarers not only need to have several soft and hard skills, they also should be a high productive workers. High productive workers that should be able to process a large number of operations in a limited or short period of time. Workers also that should be trained in all operational matters. As I mentioned, not only loading and unloading, or we have different type of cargos from containers, oversized or overweight cargo, live animals, dangerous cargo, whatever. But not only on that, but also cargo storage, handling, as well as mooring and anchoring operations for different type of ships under different type of conditions, weather conditions. But in addition to all these previous requirements, seafarers' operational activities should be developed with a permanent focus on maritime safety and protection of the maritime environment. This is in order to accomplish with new and increasing regulations and global regulations on these matters for sure. The second point I want to tell you is how can the industry attract and retain new talent? And here, for sure, first of all, it's not using magnets or handcuff as the image I'm using this slide. No, for sure not. What port and terminal industry should offer to new seafarers, in my opinion, is first, flexible scheduling, which includes, for sure, what we have developed as a consequence of the pandemic. I'm talking about the remote work, which offer a kind of balance between work and family. Also, industry should offer competent management. This means real and good leaders and managers that can guide and motivate all the team to achieve its targets and improve themselves every day. Then should offer real diversity, equity, and inclusion philosophy, where each worker are going to be evaluated based on performance indicators without considering its gender, social origin, religion, sexual or political orientation, or whatever other special characteristic out of their working results. Also, should offer professional development opportunities that can, the idea is to stimulate seafarers to be better professional every single day, a better professional every single day, and of course, stay in the industry. In addition to this, should offer company values aligned with their own, so the seafarers' values. This is in order to make seafarers feel the company as a reflex of what they are or what they want to be. Also should offer competitive salary and benefits. Of course, this is because the demanded high performance and efficiency in port labor deserve an equivalent monetary compensation. So it's natural condition. Then genuine social responsibility. This is to make them, the seafarers, feel they are contributing to improve the quality life of the families and the community. And, in addition to this, favorable work environments is another thing that industry should offer to the seafarers. Favorable work environments which promote teamwork and operation and cooperation, for example. And finally, improving its public image, the industry, because nobody wants to work in a company or industry with a very low or bad reputation in whatever possible aspect that affect the community. This is related point number 2. Next point is what new qualifications will the industry be looking for? Well, here I already mentioned some of these qualifications, but I can highlight the following ones. First of all, port operations. As I told you, loading, unloading, cargo handling, anchoring, mooring, piloting, and others, of course, should be part of the qualification. Then safety and productivity. In other words, operational excellence. Or if you prefer, and in addition, an outstanding performance. Then continuous improvement and innovation. If we want to be ready to face with success new changes or developments in the industry, changes like for example the biggest one we have ever seen in human history 2 years ago, the pandemic, we need to invest in the continuous improvement and innovation. Also, big data analysis. This is to be able to handle the huge quantity of information that the new technology offered to us about whatever single activity inside port terminals, and using this, being able to use this information in the safety improvement of daily operations. Then understanding of the industry complexity. This is to be able to identify in advance potential threats or opportunities that can affect the industry. And finally, integrity and values, for sure. Values like work ethics, as I mentioned, values like which are aligned with what the industry wants to project about themselves in the market. Next point is what role can startups and innovative thinking play in the maritime trade? Well, for sure, startups plays a very important role in the industry because they act as the main force that promotes this improvement. Perhaps one of the better examples about this role, if it's not the best one, is the one represented by this picture. I imagine the main part of you have identified immediately this guy. Is Malcolm McLean, for sure, the truck company owner who revolutionized the cargo transport and port operation industry with his invention, the shipping maritime container, invented at the end of the 50s, which has become the most important tool of the globalization, the production and the economy of a lot of countries. Port and terminal operations wouldn't be as we know it today without the containers. Containers reduce the loading and unloading time of a cargo ship from days, usually a week or more than a week, to hours. And due to that, reduce, of course, the cost of this process, making possible the huge quantity of export and import movement operations we have in a port now every day. So what the startups demand today? First of all, new technological changes. Bigger container ships, bigger ship-to-ship country cranes, better cargo softwares are the consequence of this demand, for sure. Also, online sales platforms. Now we can see how shipping lines and port operators develop and improve what calls its e-commerce pricing solution. Shipping lines do this, which offer the opportunity to get a quotation and a booking in seconds, 24 hours a day. You control your operations when you need it. Then tracking services. Shippers and carriers can track online the real location of its cargo, its containers, contributing to a better and more efficient decision making. Then container solutions, especially on inside reefer markets, increasing the shelf life of perishable product with more efficient containers technologies that reduce or eliminate the negative impact of harmful gases during the transportation process, and at the same time reducing energy consumption, but also not only in reefer market, but also saving space and facilitating containers relocation with new foldable container developments, for example. In addition to this, integrated transport management logistic solutions with complete end-to-end visibility of your cargo, handled in a multimodal way sometimes, but by the same company. That's why we see news about shipping lines that both airlines, freight forwarders, terminals, warehouses, truck companies, and also customs brokers in some countries where this is possible. And finally, cleaner transport services. Like, for example, that's why we have LNG powered container ships, more efficient fuels that reduce CO2 emissions, containers with sustainable bamboo floors, and others. Next point is what is the next gen thinking
Sorry,
for
Gino.
port and terminals?
Gino, we've just got 2 minutes
for
left
sure,
for your presentation, yeah? 2 minutes left.
Okay, for
Thank
sure
you.
we expect to continue improving safety cargo movements and reducing the process time. That's why the next gen focus for ports and terminals will be based on, in my opinion, container and cargo flow optimization. Also, productivity and quantum leap solutions. Pit stop for operations, which means less time for cargo loading and unloading, berth availability to optimize the infrastructure usage, integrated port processes and services. This is to offer complete logistic solutions and increase customer satisfaction. Port stay optimization, eliminating waste and increasing revenues without high additional investments. Intermodal logistics, giving the possibility to handle more types of cargoes and offering more specialized services. Example, Maritime Information Network, this is to improve safety and efficiency of the industry. And finally, transparency and collaboration, contributing with shippers, carriers, and authorities for more efficient decision. And the last point, how will business models evolve in the sector? Here, in my opinion, we are going to continue evolving in the same way we have done in the last years, but in a fastest way. I mean, efficiency, integration, information, technology, safety, and environmental care will be the focus that we are going to see. That's why we are going to have bigger vessels, more strong carrier alliances, more container capacity consolidation, more eco ships, lower CO2 emissions, as I mentioned, LNG options, wind, solar, hydrogen, or other technologies, more information technology to handle and cloud-based network to handle the huge amount of data that are going to be generated by new connectivity solutions, which are going to generate the more efficient and predictable ocean supply chain, also supported by new proactive real-time solutions and smart analytics to manage changes and exceptions. And that's it. That is what I have prepared for you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Gino. Now we're going to move to the Q&A session portion of the session, and I'm going to start with a question for Benjamin. Because you started with the impact on COVID, I want to just circle back and ask, have you seen any changes in how young people are moving out of study from university and transitioning into the logistics industry during that period?
I mean, during that period, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of our students had actually problems finding a job because the industry was very unsure of how things will develop. But now all the things evolved that I have explained. Actually, companies are looking for more logistics talent than before. So therefore, I think in May 2020, finding a job after graduating was a problem. I think now it isn't a problem anymore, actually. Yeah.
Okay. You had a slide up where you looked at the future mind and what sort of skills or knowledge young people would need moving into the logistics industry. And I'll just recap: holistic thinking, analytical mindset, technomically oriented, geopolitical understanding, intercultural competencies, fast and agile. If I think back to the university degree I did 15 years ago and the university degrees that I see young people that I mentor doing, they're not even scratching the surface of the breadth of skills that you are saying are required for future leaders. So are universities changing how they're training young minds, and or is it a requirement for the industry to be changing and taking on some of these additional training activities?
I think it's, on both sides. So first of all, universities are changing because at least those departments that are maybe a bit more future-oriented, of course, you always have basic studies on math and economy and things like that, and some theoretical models that will never change. But I can just talk about logistics and how we teach logistics. Our courses and the materials that we develop are constantly changing. So we really try to achieve, or at least scratch those things that I explained. We try to achieve that. And especially when you look into business schools and all of those, they are in competition among each other for people coming to the universities, and therefore they are improving their teaching more and more. So therefore, I think that improvement of teaching and training is faster today than it has been 10 or 15 years ago. I'm pretty sure about that. There are more and more technology trends emerging. And last thing about that from the university side is that we see when we offer courses like, for example, we developed the course Supply Chain Analytics. So where we transfer analytics methods from mathematics that they theoretically know from beginning of their studies to actual problems in a supply chain. This is one of the highest demand courses we have because young people need or want to know that. They want to know how a blockchain works and how they can build a digital twin and simulate that in any logistics or whatever. So they are already technomically oriented, so we can just grab that and use that for better training. And yes, it is demanded from the industry. Yeah.
Thank you, Benjamin. I think, Gino, I'll pivot then and kick that to you from the industry perspective. Sorry, I'm looking up here. I'll look this way. I know it's a little bit weird. You know, there was recurring themes between the two presentations that young people entering in the industry, future leaders, are going to need a very broad set of skills. One of the ones on yours, two of the points were high-skilled workers that are trained in all operational matters. So is it the responsibility of the individual to be trained before they come into the industry on a lot of these technology concepts, or is it the responsibility of the industry to provide that training to them when they enter?
Okay, I think it's the responsibility of both parts because it's okay. The industry needs this expertise in the new workers, but also the workers are supposed to be to look for this information. And the problem is in the market. Usually, we don't have that special training process outside the companies, outside the port or terminals. So the people, the new generations should go and initiate its activities in the port in order to learn. And that's not the idea, because the ports and terminals needs the people come knowing things. Institutes, universities used to teach basically the theoretical things, the procedure, how the things happens, but not how to move the things with your hands or do the things directly. This is a very special group of institute, if we want to use that term, that I think we need to invest. Companies, port, and terminals should invest in this kind of teaching centers in order to receive the people with the expertise they need. That is what I feel.
Thanks, Gino. Do we have any questions from the audience? I'll take that as a no. So, Gino, I'm going to stick with you, and I want to pivot to the slide that you had up on attracting and retaining talents. So, we've heard now from both speakers that the skill sets and the experience that's going to be required for our future leaders and future professionals in our industry is quite high. So obviously the investment that firstly the individuals need to make and secondly the industry needs to make is going to be quite high. How do we actually retain talent? A lot of the examples you gave on your slide we've heard quite frequently, specifically in regards to millennials. So flexible work schedules, sustainable organizations, value-driven, value over necessarily money, those sorts of ideas. But have we actually seen any change in how the industry approaches young people in terms of attracting them and retaining them, or is it just lip service?
Well, I think the industry basically should offer development opportunities and to the new generations in order to keep them working in the company. And what I have seen in recent years is exactly what you say, some kind of approach or orientation to the new generations, because, as I mentioned during my presentation, ports and terminals needs these people, and they don't have time to wait. They need to receive these people knowing the things and being experts in kind of operations, and that's why they are going to the institutes or the schools sometimes, offering or showing what is what they can offer to these people. There are not all the students are going to be suitable for that activities, but there is an important part of people that can accept this opportunity. That is what I.
Thanks, Gino. And we're going to close off. We've got 1 minute left in the session. I'm going to close off with a question for Benjamin. Benjamin, I particularly liked at the end of your presentation that you talked about lifelong learning, because I think it touches on one of the core challenges we see within the industry as we continue to roll out technology, which was a core theme in both presentations around lifelong learning. Can you give... Briefly, can you give any practical steps or ideas that the industry can be taking in terms of upskilling or retraining the people that already exist within our industry?
I think they will not manage to do that by themselves, because they are more focusing on their daily operations rather than scanning the broad field of potentials in logistics. So therefore, I think they will need external support, and we are working with several companies where we develop training concepts where hundreds of leaders from bigger companies are then sometimes virtually are trained on recent topics in logistics, and you can do that not just, 1 week per year, but you can also spread that over the whole year with shorter courses. It depends on what you would like to achieve. But in the end, yeah, I think you have to develop further training concepts in companies that are tailor-fitted to their demand, of course, but with external support, not just from universities, but also other training institutes and so on, that try to give a broad field on developments that people in this specific company need to know of. Yeah.
Thank you. Very succinct answer. So if you guys can please join me in thanking both of our presenters today in the Next Gen Talent Paradigm session.